It's no secret that Star Wars has endured some pretty tough times in recent years, with interest in its more recent projects at an all-time low. However, there's a plan in place to change that, which could be good or bad news for you depending on what side of the fence you're on.
I'll be more selective in my assignments.
So strap in and hold on tight as we speed into Disney's plans to restore the Star Wars franchise to its former glory.
I've heard that before.
Before we get into it, remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more of the Star Wars videos. So without further ado, let's talk about the great Star Wars reset and how it'll fix everything.
As you can see, this is a new era for Star Wars and Lucasfilm, with expanded opportunities for continued innovation, high-quality storytelling, and cinematic experiences like never before.
You might remember that clip from the Disney Investor Day in 2020 where Lucasfilm announced 10 Star Wars shows destined for Disney+, with the Book of Boba Fett being revealed shortly afterwards in the post-credits scene of The Mandalorian Season 2. Now, 7 of these shows you might recognise because they've now been and gone, whilst the other 3 haven't happened, and to be honest, don't look like they're going to happen either. Former Disney CEO Bob Chapek believed the company's future belonged in streaming, so he had Lucasfilm announce a host of new TV shows and only one movie to see them through the foreseeable future. Now, as we fast forward to today, and the last show on that schedule, The Acolyte, has been released and cancelled 3 weeks after what would now be the series finale. This means the plan for Star Wars, which has been in motion for the past almost 4 years, had now run its course.
We need to talk.
So with Bob Iger back in the big seat, a radically different one's on the horizon. Now, I'll take you back for a moment to when Disney purchased Lucasfilm from George Lucas for just over $4 billion back in 2012. Star Wars movies have been out of theaters for 7 years, with no set-in-stone return date in sight. George Lucas was working on the scripts for a sequel trilogy, but depending on who you ask, this might have been in a bid to increase the value of the company, with no real intentions of actually following through with it.
It was time for me to start thinking about retiring.
Anyways, along came Disney with their version of the sequel trilogy, which, regardless if you enjoyed it yourself, it was a huge success, a monster at the box office, it made a ton of cash, and so did Rogue One, a spin-off show outside of it. In fact, out of all of the 5 Star Wars movies under Disney, only one failed to crack $1 billion, which was Solo. Early on, the acquisition of Lucasfilm was a huge success, and not only were Bob Iger and the Disney shareholders pretty happy, so were the fans. Pretty much all of them were excited Star Wars was back, and they couldn't wait to see what direction they took next. The hype was seriously next level, which can also be seen by the fact that most of the notable Star Wars YouTube channels active today started during the run of the sequel trilogy. Unfortunately, since then, you can probably count on one hand the amount of notable channels that have popped up, which actually speaks to a bigger problem, which we'll talk about in a second. Anyways, following the success of the movies and sensing a shift in the landscape, Disney released their own streaming service, Disney+, and alongside it, The Mandalorian is its flagship show, which, as we all know, was a huge success, continuing their hot streak. Now, on the back of that success, it spawned a vast amount of other Star Wars TV shows, The Book of Boba Fett, Andor, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which itself managed to break Disney Plus streaming records at the time for the most viewed season premiere, whilst they've also looked to take George Lucas's stories one step further through Dave Filoni's Ahsoka series too, which incorporated elements that Lucas himself thought about touching on once upon a time. The live-action debut of The World Between Worlds and the nod to exploring the cosmic force with Anakin's appearance all sound very similar to George Lucas's idea of having Luke return one day in the distant future on a different plane of existence.
I haven't taught you everything yet.
And they've done all this while still tying it back into The Mandalorian. Through these Disney Plus shows, they've expanded Star Wars in ways never seen before. Now, on the outside, you'll be forgiven in thinking everything was going relatively well, when in fact, the reality is even now, 12 years down the line, Star Wars movies under Disney still haven't recouped what they paid for Lucasfilm at the box office, despite most of them hitting that $1 billion mark. When you factor in the costs attached to creating the movies, they're still at a loss. Now, on top of that, the Star Wars shows they're putting out on Disney Plus are showing diminishing returns. Across all 3 of its seasons, The Mandalorian has consistently been the best performer, but all the other shows have been on a decline, and as mentioned earlier, The Acolyte, the most recent, was cancelled 3 weeks after its last episode. Despite it being the most expensive show to date, costing $280 million, it had by far the lowest views. Just like in any business, if an investment isn't bringing in adequate returns, it'll be scrapped with its funds either being redistributed elsewhere or saved. Somewhere along the lines, Lucasfilm became a movie studio that quite simply wasn't making movies, instead focusing on TV shows with astronomical budgets and diminishing returns. Now, some fans will put it down to the quality of the shows being produced, whilst others will simply say, we've had too much Star Wars in recent years. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on why you think it is, but the fact of the matter is Star Wars as a brand is on the decline, which is likely the reason we haven't seen many new Star Wars YouTube channels come through in recent years. Anyways, I promised a positive video, and there's an awful lot to be positive about with Star Wars right now. It does look like the starship's finally flying in the right direction. Disney, as a business, and you don't last as long as they have without knowing what you're doing, evaluated the situation over at Lucasfilm and realised a change was needed in order for Star Wars to return to its former self. Initially under former CEO Bob Chapek, as part of their streaming push, they planned to release 2 to 3 shows a year on Disney+, which they achieved in 2022, 23, and this year 2024. However, as part of the shake-up and new plan going forward, they're now reducing that down to 1 show a year starting in 2025. So the only live-action show we're getting next year will be Andor Season 2. It's going to be a pretty dry year for Star Wars live action, mind you, saying that Andor will be 12 episodes long, and for the most part the episodes are longer than any of the other Star Wars shows they've put out on Disney+, if we look at Season 1, so I guess 1 full season of Andor would equate to more than 1.5 seasons of The Mandalorian, for example. And we'll probably get some form of animated content next year too, but the whole reason for this slowdown anyway is because they're putting Star Wars back where it belongs, on the big screen. They're taking the biggest success they've had in recent years and sending it big time, giving it a chance to be seen by a far wider audience than what's possible on Disney+. What this represents is a change of strategy, a reset of sorts in their plans for Star Wars going forwards. They've seen the success the movies had before after a long absence on screen, and they're going for the big box office success again, but this time hopefully learning from their past mistakes. They'll go about it differently. Now, the new plan, it seems, is to continue with the TV shows, but rather than having 2 or 3 a year, they're going to go for 1 or 2 movies a year and 1 show. There's a chance they've drawn a connection here between the success of The Mandalorian and the fact it was released whilst Episode 9 was in the theatres, so I think their line of thought here is that more movies could also boost the streaming side of things too. Essentially, the higher-ups at Disney and Lucasfilm have looked at where Star Wars is, realised it can't continue in the way that it was, and decided to return to what worked before, and then some. Star Wars returned with huge success in the 2010s, and even with inflation taken into account, the sequel trilogy outperformed both the other trilogies with returns, and although it served its purpose and did well during a time when lots of us were stuck at home, quite simply the landscape's changed now and they've needed to adapt. From what he's said in interviews, it's pretty obvious Bob Iger, after returning to the company, assessed the situation and told them to prioritise movies and slow down on the shows. Still going with them, but on a reduced schedule. Now for me, I've enjoyed the almost constant stream of Star Wars in my life, with the shows telling stories both smaller and larger in scale that, to be quite honest, we might have not gotten otherwise, such as The Mandalorian, Andor and Ahsoka, and I think even in what some might deem as the worst Star Wars Disney Plus offerings, there's at least some moments to enjoy in all of them. But it's all a business at the end of the day. Yes, Star Wars for 2025 looks to be pretty quiet right now, and if the rumours are true of Andor releasing early in the year, we could be waiting over 12 months for our next adventure, which would be the Mandalorian movie. But if we look at the bigger picture here, once we get through that, providing all goes to plan, of course, as Lucasfilm doesn't have the best track record of getting movies over the line, then we could be looking at 2 movies in 2026, with the new Jedi Order movie planned to be released in December, and Ahsoka Season 2 coming somewhere in between. If the plan works out and is a success, then we'll be getting more Star Wars movies than ever before, all while still being able to enjoy an offering on Disney Plus each year too. Now, there are accounts out there that will slate any new Star Wars offerings presented to them, regardless of the quality. They'll dig deep to find any kind of fault with it. Oftentimes it'll be something George Lucas himself didn't care all that much about, so there's always going to be a level of negativity surrounding Star Wars, as unfortunately that's the world we live in now. That's their business model and that's how they make their money, but that's not me and it's not what we do here. We just want good Star Wars and a decent amount of it. Anyways, do you think it's the right call to slow down the TV shows in favour of more movies? As always, drop your thoughts, theories and wilder speculations down in the comments below. Don't forget to drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and if you want to catch more of our Star Wars videos, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.